Okay, so things are a little bit different this week. So, first of all, Savannah is out of the office. She is on vacation this week with her family. And so today I am joined by my sweet friend, Brennan, who is just a joy to know. So, Brennan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I feel like a fan. I'm so excited to get to be on.
I know Brennan's always hearing me about like talking about this. So now that she's in
Yes.
the studio, I feel like this is like a big thing going on for us. But just a little bit about us. So we became friends. It was kind of a fun little friendship, like meet cute, I guess, when I first moved to Birmingham. So my sister-in-law, her mother, kind of texted me when I first moved and was like, hey, I know this girl, Brennan. Like, I think that y'all would really hit it off. And like, y'all just have a lot of things in common. And so I think one of us like texted each other and was like, hey, do you want to get coffee or something? And who knew, like 3 years later, we would be great friends. And a lot of our conversations are usually around coffee and also Jesus and fitness. So it's been cool to just see that friendship form over the years of how just kind of, I feel like I was probably really awkward at first. And so she stuck with me and here we are. So Brennan, thank you so much for being here and just tell us a little bit about you.
Yes, I feel like this is a full circle moment getting to see the back end of the podcast as well, because I feel like we usually talk about it on our coffee shop dates. So this is like an exciting moment for me. So yes, as Claire said, I am here in Birmingham, Alabama. I went to school here at Samford University, where I graduated with a degree in graphic design. So I'm very artsy, creative. I am a graphic designer for an online stationery company called Dogwood Hill, which I'm biased, but I think our work is beautiful. Our biggest market is Christmas cards. So I feel like I'm working in Christmas all year round, but I truly feel like I work with the best team of women who are just so gracious, kind, uplifting, and I'm fully remote, which is why Claire and I get to work at a coffee shop so frequently. But I feel like my team at Dogwood Hill, we're so connected. We're constantly in communications. And so though I rarely get to see them face to face, they're so good about helping me out, checking in. And truly, it's one of those, they could have a million things on their plate, but they're always willing to lend a helping hand while simultaneously raising their kids, picking up carpool, it's a beautiful balance what we have, because we still get the job done, but it just goes to show you don't have to be at your desk all day, every day, but we are willing to work hard. And I'm so proud of all the work that we do. And I will forever respect the grace and kindness that they extend to us. But when I'm not working, you can usually find me at the YMCA. I'm an avid member. It's why we talk fitness all the time. I love comparing workouts with Claire and talking about like what workout they did for the day versus what workout I did for the day. And then Claire and I also attend the same local church. So I'm pretty involved with the local church, volunteering, small groups, and truly an ideal day is just going on a walk with a friend with a coffee in hand and just being outside. So
yes, that's awesome. I feel like Brennan is you're such a person who is just so community oriented and just so intentional with people and trying to like connect with people and have other people connect with each other. And so that's just like one of the things that I love about you. So I appreciate you for doing that.
I just knew we'd be kindred spirits right away when we met, but never knew how close we could be. It's just been so sweet to witness it grow and develop over time. And I tell Claire all the time, I will state it forever, that I've had to go to counseling a lot less since being her friend, because our coffee chats truly just fuel my soul, make me feel so seen, and just truly ground me. And so
oh yeah,
I'm always like, thanks, Claire, you saved me a lot of money in counseling.
That's what we try to do.
I feel like I should be paying you because I had to go a lot less, but I do think it's a two-way street too.
Yeah, so. Definitely. 100%. So one of the things that me and Brennan normally will talk to each other about is how there are a lot of conversations that we have that we just feel like should be talked about more within the church or just within community. And I think one of those things is probably talking more so about like idolatry and that like misplaced worship that we can have within our lives. And so I felt like this was a great episode to have Brennan on just because it's about community, but it's also about, some kind of tricky, challenging stuff that we can face within our lives. And like, how do we do that in a Christian perspective? So far, like within our series, we've covered the topics of idolizing control, like what that can look like in our lives, and then also idolizing different areas of comfort. And so for this episode, we wanted to focus a little bit more on idolizing different connections over God. So this could be friendships, this could be relationships, marriage, family, and just kind of like what that looks like when we idolize those times with others over the Lord. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't have community, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't love other people and invest our time with other people. I'm just saying that sometimes in life, there can be those seasons where we may, listen to the words of affirmation or validation and try to seek that a lot more from other people than the Lord. I definitely believe that the Lord can speak through people and friendships and relationships that you have, but it's like sometimes I'm a words of affirmation gal, so sometimes that can be a tricky part for me because it's like as much as I want to sometimes be tempted to seek affirmation and validation from other people, like how do I center that into the Lord and like focus back on him?
It's so easy to get caught up in the things of this world and what we're pursuing and like good things. But I heard the saying that people are eternal. And so I just try to keep that in the back of my mind, whether I'm like witnessing to somebody or just evaluating like where I'm spending my time. And it's just so easy because we're constantly around people that like it's so easy for them to affect us and be affected by them. But I truly, yes. The older I've gotten, the more I realize how much I appreciate and value the relationships in my life and what those mean to me. Like I would say we're both very relational people. That's how I knew we'd be such good friends, because I don't think we stuck in the small talk for very long at all. It was like, okay, hi, here's your name. Let's go deep, And so it's like, okay, people are eternal. That is where I want a lot of my efforts to go when I think about it at the end of the day. Like, material things have their place, but also like, where am I prioritizing my time and my efforts and my attention? Is it in the things that are going to last, or is it the things of this world that are here today and gone tomorrow? Because, people are who we're going to be with in heaven or not, And so I just try to keep that at the forefront of my mind when I step into the day, or when I get caught up in something, or my eyes are on this new bag or these new pair of shoes, it's like, okay, people are eternal.
Yeah. And I think too, like what you were saying about as far as time and like what that can look like within the day, like something with idolatry, I'm kind of like learning as we've been studying this, is that it's so much about like where you're investing your time in. And I think sometimes just making sure that time, you can do these different activities or these fun things, but just like centering the Lord into that. Because I think sometimes when we start to drift away from that and start to just devote ourselves to a lot of times in things, whether it's like fitness or just buying certain things, and we get caught up into maybe obsessing over those things to where it becomes that like misplaced worship, that we forget that those things are a gift, and we start to think that they're more long-term, like we have to have this, and then like we keep going to something new, and try to find like full satisfaction into very temporary things, whereas like people are eternal. And so we need to make sure that our relationships are also centered into that, love God, love others, and that like we're bringing him into the forefront as well within those relationships. Because I think there are some times where with this misplaced worship that we can have on either friendships or like family members or just loved ones, period, like it can be sometimes that, am I seeking this person and like what they say and their value? Am I trusting in that more than I'm trusting in the Lord? And like, how am I spending my time devoting just in prayer? Like, I think sometimes when we place our trust more into others, that can end up leading us into anxiety or disappointment, because we're all sinners and we're all broken and we're always going to disappoint people at some point. But when we place our trust more into the Lord and then have that community kind of around in that circle, then what does that look like? Does that give us more peace and more joy that's found there?
Totally. And so, yeah. And I feel like we should say we are no relational experts at all.
No.
I'm sure we both can say that we've had our friendships that have not flourished, but probably failed. But it's just a constant learning and growing opportunity. And like at the end of the day, like we're still humans. We're on this side of heaven. Like we're bound to mess up no matter how perfectly we try to do things. We're going to mess up. And as you said, be disappointed in others, and we'll disappoint others, but there's grace and there's forgiveness. And one thing I'm reminded of, I heard the analogy, like our relationships, we must seek our vertical relationship with the Lord first before we seek our horizontal relationships that surround us. And as a creative, I'm such a visual person, and I just love that visual analogy that it gives. Like, it is vertical before it is ever horizontal. But I think that's so easy to get caught up because we're surrounded by the horizontal. Like, we are surrounded by the tangible horizontal day in, day out relationships. But I'm also reminded too, like, the love we extend to others comes out of the overflow, the love that we receive from Christ. And so it's like, if we're not getting that poured in from time with God, then I feel like we're pouring from an empty bucket as well. And it comes up empty when you're looking to seek it from others, like you're bound to be disappointed. So
yeah, I think just a question I had was maybe what are some like practical ways that you find fulfilling your time like with the Lord throughout like the days or just like the week? Like what can that kind of look like for you?
I'm fortunate that I get to work from home. And so I usually start around the same time every day, but I genuinely enjoy a slower morning of waking up early, spending time in the Word. My roommates and I share a coffee pot. So I love like waking up, going over to our coffee pot, pouring a cup of coffee. And then I usually have a spot on our couch that I sit at every morning and do my quiet time. And that truly just sets the tone for my day. When I can have a slower start, be grounded in the word of the Lord, read through the devotionals that I'm going through, write out my prayers for the day, I just feel like it sets the tone for the day, because I notice the days that I don't do it or don't have time, I'm so much more rushed and frazzled and just like not grounded at all. And so I really try to prioritize starting my day with the word of the Lord, because if I say I'm going to do it at night, the likelihood of me doing it at night are very slim by the time it actually comes around. So that's something I try to prioritize first and foremost. And then I'll usually go work at a coffee shop most mornings. And so I'll play worship music on my drive to the coffee shop to continue that good pattern that I've already started for the day. And then even just playing sermons or faith-based podcasts in the background while I'm working, if I'm able to. Those are usually things that just ground me, set me up for the day, help remind me what's important in life, and just set the tone for my day. So
yeah, I love that how you kind of intertwine that within the day. It's kind of, you have the morning, but then you also throughout the day are continuing with the worship music or listening to a podcast or doing something to like kind of fulfill that, even just throughout the day. And I think that's part of it, is like we get to have God within our lifestyle and not just a separate like appointment time we have with him. It's like, no, he's like within the whole being.
And we talked about this last week, the phrase like we get to do secular jobs with a sanctified heart. So it's like, how do we invite him into the everyday moments and the truly moment by moment situations that come up, whether that's praying out loud while you're driving to work because you can't be on your phone, or just setting aside any time that you can throughout the day to pause, reflect, and refocus.
Yeah, kind of finding those little like pockets of time, like the margins. Yeah.
Yes. It doesn't always have to be so like structured and an hour long at a time. Like, no, it's truly pulling strength from him whenever we need it. Well, we always need it, but whenever we can too.
I feel like that's something that's really helped me just within singleness, having that freedom of just like being able to kind of create that lifestyle within myself of just like intertwining those things. But I know like with singleness, there's also that temptation to feel like a relationship is going to fully like satisfy you. And I definitely have seen that like within my life of having those thoughts or just like a heart posture of maybe saying like I can only be fulfilled or content if I have this person in my life or if I have this certain relationship status. And I think that there's kind of this reminder to know that desires that we have are not always bad things. It's just more so when we're placing those desires over what the Lord has for us in that current season. And I think sometimes with just singleness or marriage, like they're both a gift that are given to us. Marriage and singleness are both this gift that we receive during seasons of our life, and how we need to hold onto those things and care for those things when we're in those seasons, but also how do we, not misplace that season over what God is speaking to us or teaching us, and making sure that we have a right relationship with him too. I guess just kind of also too thinking maybe of like in those times where you may have misplaced a relationship or a relationship status or a person over the Lord, like trying to notice that, but then also trying to come back of like, okay, but how can I find like full fulfillment in the Lord and like have that heart posture correct with him instead of trying to misplace a gift like over him.
Yeah, when I was like thinking about this episode, I just remember this moment like maybe 2 years ago. I went to this wedding and I just remember feeling so single at this wedding. Like, just Satan was so mean and got so in my head about things. And I remember like I went by myself. I did not know many people, but I was like, no, I'll go. Like, this is a good friend. Like, want to support her on her big day. And I remember pulling up and just feeling like so out of my skin, just so uncomfortable, and just like left just like more discouraged, honestly. Just like, wow, that was beautiful. Good for her,
Mm-hmm.
But I remember 2 years later going to another friend's wedding at the exact same venue and just being in a completely different spot. Like, I remember leaving that wedding just feeling like so grateful, so appreciative for the friendships that surrounded me, the community, the bride and groom that I got to celebrate. I think when I think about those 2 years in between, the Lord did a lot of work in me and truly aligned my desires to be more with his and
Mm-hmm.
focused on him versus the things of this world. And just realizing like, okay, their blessings and their gifts from the Lord do not negate from the blessings that he has for me. Like if you think about it, it's like, okay, their husband or their baby, like that is not my husband or my baby, so
Mm-hmm.
I can celebrate with them in this because I know that is not mine personally,
Mm-hmm.
and I just remember leaving that wedding just like, oh my goodness, thank you, Lord, for the growth that you have done in me and how
Mm-hmm.
you have changed my heart and aligned my desires with yours, and how, and I can just take no credit for that whatsoever. Like, it truly was about 2 years of wilderness and walking through the valley, but those years were so pivotal and so formative in my relationship with the Lord that I'm like, wow, that was so worth it too. And just what a beautiful opportunity to be on the other side and get to celebrate that. And sure, of course, I struggle with that time to time, but I can look back and say, okay, he brought me through that once. Like, we'll get through it again.
Yeah, and I love that you pointed out that there can be kind of this joy and sorrow too, like
Mm-hmm.
mix of saying like, okay, that's not my story. And so
Mm-hmm.
yes, like I can celebrate them for being in that story, but I also can be acknowledging of just like I don't have that yet, and like that may sting a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
or I just don't have that now. And so, kind of acknowledging the joy and the sorrow too, because I think there have definitely been times for me where I've been so discontent that I haven't really been able to celebrate people well in those
Mm-hmm.
seasons,
Mm-hmm.
because I was thinking like, oh, well, I don't have that and they do. And so I felt like sometimes it just wasn't fair. But it's also just saying like, but how much are you placing that idea of marriage for fulfillment for your life instead of the idea of who God is and having him be like your true fulfillment? Because I think when we're able to have more confidence and trust in the Lord's plan and that he's not withholding from us from these gifts and that
Mm-hmm.
everything has a time and a season, I feel like we can feel a lot more confident and purposeful in those times when we're going to a wedding and like we may be single, but we can dance with our friends and we can have the best time,
Yeah.
like how
Yes.
can we, just be present where we're present.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking like, oh, it has to be all or nothing. Like, if my joy is in the Lord,
Mm-hmm.
I can't want for anything. But I remember hearing like, no, you can have joy in the Lord, but still have these desires as well, these good desires. And I felt so freed once I finally heard that, because I was like, I can't want for anything. But it's like, no, we're still on this side of heaven. Like, our hearts are
Mm-hmm.
so fickle. Like, yes, our joy is in the Lord, but he gives us desires for these good things as well.
I think too with marriage, sometimes it can become that season of engagement and marriage can become tricky because there's a lot of priorities or a lot of time spent on the wedding day itself. And that can be also really, I think, tricky sometimes to not get so consumed with how much time like you're spending on trying to plan a wedding. And then also sometimes I think we can fall into that temptation of caring more about like the aesthetic or the appearance of the wedding day versus trying to think of it in a broad scope of like the actual marriage itself. Because I think sometimes in those temptations, it's like a good reminder to be thinking of the wedding day is a day and it's spent with loved ones and it's going to be fun and it's going to be how it is and we're going to celebrate, but there's a long road ahead, And I think family members or friends, there's always just a lot of opinions going on, a lot of voices going on with a wedding. And so I think it's very natural for us to feel kind of this push and pull, but it's also trying to keep the Lord at the center of it and trying to look at the long term of the marriage itself and making sure that the Lord's centered and placed, at a higher value over that and over a wedding day than just the day itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was quite literally in a good friend's wedding this past weekend. And I just remember throughout her entire engagement saying, she was excited for her wedding day, but she was more excited for the marriage. Like you could just see how excited she was to truly do this life with her partner, with her best friend. And that just really stood out to me because I feel like when you hear of other people's weddings or previous experiences, like it's just all so much attention and focus is on this one day and the details and like how everything looks, what it's going to look like. But like from the beginning, I feel like for her, it was so much more on the marriage and she was so much more excited about learning and gaining knowledge about what the Bible says about marriage and what a godly relationship looks like and what raising a family looks like in the church and everything, and I just was so encouraged by that because I was like, you're right. Like it is so much more about growing together with Christ first and foremost, but then walking alongside each other in that sanctification and pointing one another towards the Lord. Like, yes, the day is great and beautiful, but what does the day in and day out look like together? And I think it just made it so much more fun to celebrate because you're like, yes, we're here alongside y'all. Like we're not just here for your wedding day, but we want to walk with y'all once the wedding is over and life happens. It's like we're here to steward you on and remind y'all of the covenant that you made between each other and before the Lord. And it's like, how can we keep that at the center of it and Christ at the center of it versus flowers, food, just
like the little
like
things.
Exactly. The details.
I think sometimes those traditions, those events can kind of help us understand how things just come and pass really quickly in life and that we're never always like promised tomorrow, but it's like, how can we live like daily just in that eternal perspective too? And how can we know that sometimes these things in our life, these desires that we have, they're gifts and they're good things, but how can we know that sometimes they are very temporary and they're not where we find like our full satisfaction in?
Yeah, and I feel like I'm kind of backtracking here, but I remember hearing idolatry. I believe D.A. Carson defined it this way, as idolatry as dethroning God. And I just, once again, I love that visual. I was like, that is so simple and direct and straight to the point, but so true, that anything we put above him, we're dethroning him. And so I just try to think about that. So much easier said than done, but it's like, okay, am I putting X before the Lord or am I putting him first and foremost? Like, what am I putting on the throne instead of the Lord? Like, let's switch that back, sis. So,
yeah, because it's definitely a heart posture. And so we have to have that heart check with ourselves. And also, too, just, noticing it in other people as well, of just, sometimes having those conversations of like, hey, I've noticed that this is something that you might be, misplacing, like what's going on in that, especially just close friends that you can have those accountability conversations with. So I'm curious to know this for you, Brennan. So when I was thinking about like weddings, I was also thinking about traditions. And I know that you were saying within work, like you do a lot of graphic design for Christmas and for other holidays. And so I think sometimes too, within the holidays, what I'm noticing is we can become very fixated on the appearance of something or or fixated too on traditions always being the same and having like a set stone with how a tradition should look like. And again, like those are gifts and blessings and just a reminder of like the faithfulness of God in our lives that we get to celebrate those days. But I'm just curious, like, how have you noticed this within just your life or like with work of just this appearance of traditions and like becoming fixated on that?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned earlier, I pretty much work in Christmas all year round. Like, we start designing and planning out for Christmas in that year for the current year. So it's like always something in the back of our mind, always something we're looking at. We as designers, we design so heavily during the summertime. And so I feel like by the time Christmas, the holiday season actually rolls around, I'm like, oh wait, what? Like this hasn't already happened. Because we launch it in September, and it's the bulk of what we do in our business. And I love that. I love I feel like an elf just working Christmas all year round. But I think one thing I've noticed is that by the time, like I said, Christmas actually comes around, some years I'm not feeling so holly and jolly because I'm like, welcome everybody. Like I've been here already. I was telling Claire earlier, I was like the older I get, the less emphasis I put on traditions. I'm just like, let it be everything that it's meant to be. And so I was telling Claire in an earlier conversation, like, I think I went on Instagram the day after Halloween, November 1st, and it seemed like everyone and their mother already had their Christmas decorations up. And I suddenly felt behind for not having my house already decorated. And I'm like, it's November 1st. And I recognize that, like, as these influencers, it's their job. But I was just like, okay, work gets super busy for me this time of year. And I feel like I'm able to compartmentalize that differently because it's my job and I love it. And this is like the best time of the year for my job. So it's like, I'm able to compartmentalize that differently and separate it. But when it comes to everything else outside, like the seasons and the traditions and the this and that, I just told Claire, I was like, I just think I'm going to try to get off of social media for the rest of the year because there's already so many distractions. And I feel like Christmas is already, it can just lead very consumerism very quickly. And so it's like, it is a fight to remain focused and remember what this season is about. And so I just told Claire, I was like, yeah, I think I'm just going to try not to get on social media through the rest of the year because work is going to be crazy. But also, like, I really want to finish the end of the year well. And I want to focus on what the season truly means. Like, that we get to celebrate God coming down from heaven to be with us. And so, but I feel like the great part about that with work is that it almost keeps me in that mindset all year round because I'm constantly thinking about Christmas. And so instead of there being such an emphasis on this time of year, it's like, no, this should be something that we're practicing day in and day out and prioritizing our relationship with the Lord outside of everything else that is going on. And I'm just reminded too, we may have all these traditions that we want to do and try to keep up and value, but it's like, okay, the Lord loves us no matter what, whether we get around to these all these traditions or not. He loves us on our worst day as much as he loves us on our best day. And so I think I was telling you in one of our conversations, like, I'm going to really try to write out what I want to do during this holiday season. What do I want to prioritize? And then anything else, great if I get to do it. Totally fine if not, and I just feel like it takes so much pressure out of the, like, I have to do everything and be for everything, and it's like, no, like, it is a fight to remember what the season is about. Let's celebrate, like, constantly checking my heart posture and all the stuff, all the other things are just extra.
Yeah. And it takes like a lot of intentionality to do that, and then it also takes a lot of, okay, what's the action step that I have to apply? It's like a intentionality of recognizing it and noticing it, and then that action step of, okay, how do I actually apply this to where I need to just, if I notice that this is going to distract me, how can I take a step back and just take that action step of applying that? And I think that it can look different throughout seasons. Like some Christmases and some times of the year, we can have those times where it doesn't affect us as much. And then sometimes it may affect us more. And so kind of noticing how our heart posture does change and what it's more tempted towards in those areas. I think it requires a lot of prayer and connection with the Lord, but also for his guidance and his direction to just notice those areas in our life where we feel like this is an area of temptation and we need to be on guard from those things.
Totally agree. I feel like Christmas now for my family looks a lot different than it used to. And that's kind of a big part of my testimony. But I feel like ever since then, it's just allowed me to have an open hand approach, just letting the holidays be whatever they're meant to be as well, you know? And that's just really sweet to see how the Lord has redeemed Christmas time for me in my family, because it used to be not the best time. I feel like the holidays often bring up a lot of emotions of, well, they're no longer here, or man, I don't have this in my life, or Christmas used to look like this for my family, but now it doesn't. And it's like truly just trying to remember and put Christ at the center of this holiday season and every day, but also just letting it be what it's meant to be. I feel like there was just a lot of control in it for me in previous seasons. And now I just try to think like, okay, Lord, please help me to be a light to others. It's also a great time to have conversations with non-believers because everybody's kind of talking about it. You know, it's a great opportunity to invite friends, coworkers, anybody in your life to church. Like I've heard people are much more willing to go around this time of year than they are on just a random Sunday throughout the year. So really leaning into that and sharing with non-believers like what the season is about and why we as believers celebrate it. And also just praying like, Lord, I may not be surrounded by everybody that I want to be, but please open my eyes to those around me that I can help feel seen, known, valued, and loved, you know? And so it's almost like I try to go in as much as possible without any expectations and just let it be, let the Lord truly guide each day for the holiday season and give thanks in all circumstances, whether it looked like I hoped it would or whether it looks completely different than I thought it would. And like, I don't know about you, but sometimes when when I think about Christmas and Easter, I feel like there's this pressure to feel this certain way or have this big faith moment because it's Christmas or Easter, that oftentimes when I feel like there's this extra pressure, maybe I just put it on myself to feel so close to the Lord during these times of the year that I almost oh, I'm a terrible believer or follower of Christ if I don't feel super close to him during this time of year, you know?
Yeah.
And that's when I have to remind myself, like, my walk with the Lord is a day in and day out commitment. It is not just a Christmas Day, Easter Day type of situation. And so what does it look like to practice that daily and to be with the Lord wherever I am, you know?
That was like the perfect way to wrap this up. I think I'm just going to let her have her mic drop moment. Truly. But thank you so much for being here. And I really appreciate like this topic of idolatry and just the study that we've been able to do, because it is a topic that we need to talk more about and just have these accountability talks of what this looks like in our lives. But I appreciate you so much, Brennan, and just thankful to know you. And thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. Like I said, I feel like this is a full circle moment to get to be on the back end and see it, because I love following along, listening, and hearing you talk about it. And I told Claire I made a cup of coffee for this. Just treat it like our usual coffee conversations, as if we're sitting across the table from one another. So
this time we've just invited everybody else in. Yeah.
Exactly. Welcome to Coffee Conversations with Claire, as I usually refer to it. So, but no, truly just so grateful for you and to have you in my corner and to have people like you in my life to remind me and help me reorient and focus and call me out if I'm idolizing something too much in my life. But I think we talked about this last week, that we heard a local pastor say, like, you're only as free as you are honest. And so just continuing to keep that honest conversation with one another, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, you know?
Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to this episode of On Purpose and For a Purpose. Don't forget to hang out with us over on Instagram at On Purpose Podcast so that you can be the first to see updates and hear about upcoming episodes. And hey, if you're loving being a part of our community, we would love it if you could leave a review and share this episode with your friends. We can't wait to go through this study together and learn more about what it means to show up on purpose and for a purpose.